Time to run down the weekend in the ACC with Mike McDaniel from inside the ACC, as we, of course, have one obvious headliner in this batch of games, as unfortunately the Florida school still unable to play, and Georgia Tech also affected. Mike, how you doing today?
Doing well, Mark. How are you doing?
Doing great. So I'm looking forward to this primetime matchup. Louisville Clemson. They had a barn burner at Clemson last year where Lamar Jackson led a late drive, got within 10 to 15 yards of pulling off the upset. And, of course, Clemson needed that game with the loss to Pitt to make it to the ACC championship game and on to win the whole thing. And then the slide came for Louisville down the stretch. So here we are 1 year later, and they match up at Louisville.
Yeah, so this is a tough game to handicap, I guess, from a betting perspective, right? Because Clemson enters as a 3-point road favorite. Now, Papa John's is a very tough place to go and play. Ask Florida State. They went in there at noon last year in mid-September and got their hats handed to them. It's interesting because Clemson's front seven against Louisville's offensive line is really the only matchup we care about in this game, in my opinion, because you look at Louisville's offensive line and they were struggling so mightily towards the back half of last season, a reason why they slid down the stretch and lost the final 3 games. And some of their games there late in the season were a little bit shaky to begin with. You'll remember that game against Wake Forest where, it was going back and forth. That was in November before the slide. They were going back and forth and couldn't really put Wake Forest away until a strong flurry of scoring in the fourth quarter. That was kind of the beginning of the drop-off for the offensive line for Louisville. And, their fans are suggesting, because through 2 performances this year against North Carolina and in the opener against Purdue, they haven't given up as many sacks on the offensive line. But you take a step back and you realize that those 2 defenses are really nothing to write home about. Not great defenses that they've faced so far, and definitely not even close to a level of defense they'll be facing on Saturday night against Clemson. Clemson's front seven is one of the best in the country, at least top 3 or 4 in the entire nation, and one of the best in the ACC, right up there with Florida State. And what's scary about Clemson is that their defensive line this year might be even better than it was last year. And the defensive line last year was a strong reason why they ended up winning the national championship, because they were able to get pressure on the quarterback and they were able to stop the run. And that's what I worry about with Louisville in this game, even though they're at home. And I'm thinking about how the Cardinals nearly knocked off Clemson in Death Valley last October. You take a step back and think about it and you say, man, Louisville did lose a lot of talent on offense and defense, though. This is not the same team. And I'm not really sure the offensive line has gotten all that much better. And because of that, I love Clemson in this game. I don't think they're going to score a ton of points. I really don't. We still don't know 100% what we have in Kelly Bryant yet. I mean, they're still trying to get their feet under them there with the Clemson offense. Kelly Bryant clearly is good. He's the right guy to play quarterback, at least this year, for the Tigers. He's been poised. He was really strong against Auburn last weekend. Auburn's got a great defense, obviously, and they were able to put a lot of pressure on Clemson, but Clemson responded and were able to punch him right back in the mouth, which I think is very encouraging if you're a Clemson fan looking out towards the rest of the season. So I think Clemson will score enough points here against Louisville to end up getting the job done. But the reason why I'm picking the Tigers in this one over the Cardinals is purely because of the defense. As good as Lamar Jackson is, if he doesn't have time to throw, it's going to be a really, really rough evening for Louisville. Our buddy Joey Weaver, who I have my podcast with every week on the ACC, he put it this way: this is going to be one of the worst games that Louisville plays all year, and he really believes that. Now, I'm not sure if that's entirely going to be the case. Louisville still has a bunch of tough games remaining on their schedule, but my belief is shared with him in that I don't believe Louisville will be able to block Clemson up front. I think that's what's going to end up being the difference in this game. So I like Clemson to go on the road and win here.
I have yet to make a prediction on this game, but release my picks each and every week, so they'll be coming up soon. So don't hold me to this one, but I really like Clemson in this game. I know that it's a difficult environment at Papa John's Stadium. You also have, of course, the Lamar Jackson factor, possibly the best player in the country, the most athletic offensive player in the country. I don't think there's a question about that. And I just believe in Clemson defensively. I believe in their ability to play in hostile environments. I don't think that phases them at this point. I know a lot of these guys are not the guys that won championships in the previous 2 seasons, but still the core of this team is intact. They've been in the culture. They've been under Dabo Swinney, and I just think that they're the better team. I still think a gap exists in the ACC between Clemson, Florida State, and everybody else, and maybe Miami's got a chance to catch up with the other 2. We shall see, but I don't think Louisville is quite there, and I really believe in Clemson's defense in particular. Auburn has some issues on offense, but Auburn will score points against decent defenses in the SEC. Jarrett Stidham's a good quarterback. Now, Lamar Jackson's a completely different animal in terms of mobility, but to hold Auburn to just over 100 yards of total offense and 6 points is pretty ridiculous. So Clemson Louisville highlights the weekend. Certainly the first big matchup we've had in the ACC this season. Louisville, lackluster performance against Purdue, escaped with a win, turned the ball over all over the place, but Lamar still had like 500 plus yards of offense. We really saw Louisville kick it into gear against an outmanned North Carolina team that was hanging in the game for most of it through about 3 quarters before the Cardinals put it on overdrive.